Welcome, Mitchell Mustangs. Thank you so much for viewing another language arts video. So we have been reading together for a few days now, and we are into this book, Charlotte's Web, and there are several things that we know about the book so far. We know that it's a fiction because we are being introduced to lots of different characters. There's a setting of the farm, and there seems to be some events, some type of problems that have already occurred. It's definitely a fantasy because the animals are talking. So now, as a reader, I'm at a point where I'm starting to make theories as I'm reading along because great readers think about the text, piece together important parts of the text, and then make theories based on what the text actually says. So, right now, before we start reading, things that I'm thinking about. I make a theory that Wilbur and Charlotte are going to be true friends. And I say true friends because I think this is going to be a very special friendship based on things that the author has already said. So, looking back on some texts that we've already read, a couple days ago, the text stated Wilbur didn't want food, he wanted love. Then later, we saw that Wilbur was feeling so lonely. It said he didn't know whether he could endure the awful loneliness anymore. And later in the page, it said, "Do you want a friend, Wilbur?" It said, "I'll be a friend to you. I've watched you all day and I like you." So the author's put out there that Wilbur's looking for a friend. The author's showing how desperately lonely Wilbur is. Then we meet a friend. The author goes on to share information about this new friend. At one point, when we learn that Charlotte is catching the fly, it says Wilbur watched in horror. But then Charlotte talks about who she is. And she says, "I have to live, don't I?" And there's a shift here because Wilbur considers and he says, "Why, yes, of course. Do they taste good?" Then he's curious about his friend. It goes on in that chapter to talk about Charlotte, where she's explaining who she is and where she comes from and why she eats flies. And the chapter ends with Wilbur thinking, "I've got a new friend all right, but what a gamble friendship is." And then it goes on to say, "How can I learn to like her, even though she is pretty and, of course, clever?" Underneath her rather bold and cruel exterior, she had a kind heart, and she was to prove loyal and true to the very end. So the text actually says there, loyal and true. The text talks about how friendship is such a gamble. All of these sentences, all of these parts pieced together, I believe support my theory that this friendship is going to be extra special. And I think the different pieces of the elements of the two of them being so different is setting a stage for two friends to come together. So let's read on today. As I'm reading, I invite you to create your own theories based in what the text says, based in text evidence, because great readers understand that creating theories as we read and supporting them with the text and adjusting them when we need to as we read on. But great readers do this to stay engaged and want to read more. So I invite you to make your own theories as we read today. Chapter 6. Summer days. The early summer days on a farm are happiest and fairest days of the year. Lilacs bloom and make the air sweet, and then fade. Apple blossoms come with the lilacs, and the bees visit around among the apple trees. The days grow warm and soft. School ends and the children have time to play and to fish for trouts in the brook. Avery often brought a trout home in his pocket, warm and stiff and ready to be fried for supper. Now that school was over, Fern visited the barn almost every single day to sit quietly on her stool. The animals treated her as an equal. The sheep lay calmly at her feet. Around the 1st of July, the workhorses were hitched to the moving machine, and Mr. Zuckerman climbed into the seat and drove into the field. All morning you could hear the rattle of the machine as it went round and round, while the tall grass fell down behind the cutter bar in long green swaths. Next day, if there was no thunder shower, all hands would help rake and pitch and load, and the hay would be hauled to the barn in the high hay wagon, with Fern and Avery riding at the top of the load. Then the hay would be hoisted sweet and warm into the big loft until the whole barn seemed like a wonderful bed of timothy and clover. It was fine to jump in and perfect to hide in, and sometimes Avery would find a little grass snake in the hay and would add it to the other things in his pocket. Early summer days are a jubilee time for birds. In the fields around the house, in the barn, in the woods, in the swamp, everywhere love and songs and nests and eggs. From the edge of the woods, the white-throat sparrow, which must come all the way from Boston, calls, "Oh, Peabody, Peabody, Peabody!" On an apple bough, the phoebe teeters and wags its tail and says, "Phoebe, Phoebe!" The song sparrow, who knows how brief and lovely life is, says, "Sweet, sweet, sweet interlude, sweet, sweet, sweet interlude." If you enter the barn, the swallows swoop down from their nests and scold. "Cheeky, cheeky, cheeky, cheeky," they say. In early summer, there are plenty of things for a child to eat and drink and chew. Dandelion stems are full of milk, clover heads are loaded with nectar, the frigid air is full of ice-cold drinks. Everywhere you look is life, even the little ball of spit on the weed stalk, if you poke it apart, has a green worm inside of it. And on the underside of the leaf of the potato vine are the bright orange eggs of the potato bug. It was on a day in early spring that the goose eggs hatched. This was an important event in the barn cellar. Fern was there sitting on her stool when it happened. Except for the goose herself, Charlotte was the first to know about the gooselings and that they had arrived. The goose knew a day in advance and that knew that they were coming. She could hear their weak voices calling from inside the egg. She knew that they were in a desperately cramped position inside the shell and were most anxious to break through and get out. So she sat quite still and talked less than usual. When the first gooseling poked its gray-green head through the goose's feathers and looked around, Charlotte spied it and made the announcement. "I am sure," she said, "that every one of us here will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of our friend, the goose, she now has something to show for it. The gooselings have arrived. May I offer my sincere congratulations?" "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you," said the goose, nodding and bowing shamelessly. "Thank you," said the gander. "Congratulations!" shouted Wilbur. "How many gooselings are there? I can only see 1. "There are 7, said the goose. "Fine," said Charlotte. 7 is a lucky number. "Luck had nothing to do with this," said the goose. "It was good management and hard work." At this point, Templeton showed his nose from the hiding place under Wilbur's trough. He glanced at Fern, then crept cautiously toward the goose, keeping close to the wall. Everyone watched him, for he was not well liked, not trusted. "Look," he began in his sharp voice, "you say you have gooselings. There were 8 eggs. What happened to the other egg? Why didn't it hatch?" "It was a dud, I guess," said the goose. "What are you going to do with it?" continued Templeton, his little round beady eyes fixed on the goose. "You can have it," replied the goose. Roll it away and add it to your nasty little collection. Templeton had a habit of picking up unusual objects around the farm and storing them in his home. He saved everything. Certainly, Ertney, said the gander. You may have the egg, but I'll tell you one thing. Templeton, if I ever catch you pokey, your ugly nose around our gooselings, I'll give you the worst pounding a rat ever took. And the gander opened his strong wings and beat the air with them to show his power. He was strong and brave, but the truth is, both the goose and the gander were worried about Templeton, and with good reason. The rat had no morals, no conscience, no scruples, no consideration, no decency, no milk of rodent kindness, no higher feeling, no friendliness, no anything. He would kill a gooseling if he could ever get away with it. The goose knew it. Everybody knew it. With his broad bill, the goose pushed the unhatched egg out of the nest, and the entire company watched in disgust while the rat rolled it away. Even Wilbur, who could eat almost anything, was appalled. Imagine wanting a junky old rotten egg, he muttered. A rat is a rat, said Charlotte. She laughed a tinkling little smile. But my friends, if that ancient egg ever breaks, this barn will be untenable. What's that mean? Asked Wilbur. It means nobody will be able to live here on account of the smell. A rotten egg is a regular stink bomb. I won't break it, snarled Templeton. I know what I'm doing. I handle stuff like this all the time. He disappeared into his tunnel, pushing the goose egg in front of him. He pushed and nudged till he succeeded in rolling it to his lair under the trough. That afternoon, when the wind had died down and the barnyard was quiet and warm, the gray goose led his 7 goslings off the nest and out into the world. Mr. Zuckerman spied them when he came with Wilbur's supper. Well, hello there, he said, smiling all over. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 baby geese. Now, isn't that lovely? Chapter 7, Bad News. Wilbur liked Charlotte better and better each day. Her campaign against insects seemed sensible and useful. Hardly anybody around the farm had a good word to say for a fly. Flies spent their time pestering others. The cow hated them. The horses detested them. The sheep loathed them. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman were always complaining about them and putting up screens. Wilbur admired the way Charlotte managed. He was particularly glad that she always put her victim to sleep before eating it. It's real thoughtful of you to do that, Charlotte, he said. Yes, she replied in her sweet musical voice. I always give them an anesthetic so they won't feel pain. It's a little service I throw in. I'm going to stop and think about that for a minute. What the author just said to us is confirming my theory, I believe. The author is continuing this idea that Wilbur and Charlotte are very different, yet they admire each other. And right there, Wilbur again is talking about how he admires what Charlotte does. Even though he doesn't totally understand it, he's trying to get to know her, and that's what true friends do. True friends accept one another and look for the good in each other. So let's read on. As the days went by, Wilbur grew and grew. He ate 3 big meals a day. He spent long hours lying on his side, half asleep, dreaming pleasant dreams. He enjoyed good health, and he gained a lot of weight. One afternoon, when Fern was sitting on her stool, the oldest sheep walked into the barn and stopped to pay a call on Wilbur. Hello, she said. Seems to me you're putting on weight. Yes, I guess I am, replied Wilbur. At my age, it's a good idea to keep gaining. Just the same, I don't envy you, said the old sheep. You know why they're fattening you up, don't you? No, said Wilbur. Well, I don't like to spread bad news, said the sheep. But they're fattening you up because they're going to kill you. That's why. They're going to what? Screamed Wilbur. Fern grew rigid on her stool. Kill you. Turn you into smoked bacon and ham, continued the old sheep. Almost all young pigs get murdered by the farmer as soon as the real cold weather sets in. There's a regular conspiracy around here to kill you at Christmas time. Everybody is in the plot. Lurvy, Zuckerman, even John Arable. Mr. Arable? Sobbed Wilbur. Fern's father? Certainly. When a pig is to be butchered, everybody helps. I'm an old sheep, and I see the same thing, same old business year after year. Arable arrives with his .22, shoots the... Stop! Wilbur screamed. I don't want to die! Save me! Somebody save me! Fern was just about to jump up when a voice was heard. Be quiet, Wilbur, said Charlotte, who had been listening to this awful conversation. I can't be quiet, screamed Wilbur, racing up and down. I don't want to be killed. I don't want to die. Is it true what the old sheep says, Charlotte? Is it true they're going to kill me when the cold weather comes? Well, said the spider, plucking thoughtfully at her web, the old sheep has been around this barn a long time. She has seen many a spring pig come and go. If she says they plan to kill you, I'm sure it's true. It's also the dirtiest trick I've ever heard of. What people think of. Wilbur burst into tears. I don't want to die, he moaned. I want to stay alive right here in my comfortable manure pile with all of my friends. I want to breathe the beautiful air and lie in the beautiful sun. You're certainly making a beautiful noise, snapped the old sheep. I don't want to die, screamed Wilbur, throwing himself to the ground. You shall not die, said Charlotte briskly. What, really? Cried Wilbur. Who's going to save me? I am, said Charlotte. How? Asked Wilbur. That remains to be seen. But I'm going to save you, and I want you to quiet down immediately. You're carrying on in such a childish way. Stop your crying. I can't stand hysterics. So, readers, my theory is continuing to be supported. Right when it says there, we learn about this issue that's going to probably be put in place for Wilbur, a terrible issue. And in the moment of his complete hysteria, when he's screaming and he's crying, Charlotte is very calm and she says, I'll save you. So, great readers, stay engaged with texts as we read. And we do this by making theories. We pay attention to those important pieces, those important sentences, and then we start piecing together how those important sentences and paragraphs and parts fit into the whole to help us to support our theories based in what the text says, text evidence. So as you read your independent reading books for the next few days, I invite you to think about the lessons that we've talked about this week, the things that great readers do. Great readers identify genre and then use those elements and the things that we know about genre to make meaning. Great readers look and follow through and find important pieces that the author places inside of the text, and then we piece those sentences together, those parts together to create theories based in what the text says. And as we read, it keeps us engaged because we want to find out, is my theory correct? Am I following along? And we look for that as we read. So as you read your independent reading books, Mitchell Mustangs, create theories based in what the text says. So this is our fourth lesson for the week. And I will see you again on Monday because Dr. Skeen will be doing a wonderful writing workshop lesson tomorrow. Thank you so much, Mitchell Mustangs, for very easily adjusting to our new online classroom platform from our face-to-face to online. You've done a tremendous job this week, and all of your language arts teachers, including myself, we are so proud of you that you are showing the great character of Mitchell Mustangs. You're being resilient in this time, in this moment in history, and we really, truly appreciate you. We're all so grateful to be your teachers. We're so grateful to be Mitchell Mustangs with you. So I will sign off until Monday. And the last thing that I want to say to you is stay healthy and happy reading and writing over Friday and through the weekend. And I will see you Monday. And my one studio person here, George, says goodbye to you too. I'll show you George since he's with me with all of the videos, if you can see George there. So George and I say goodbye. Happy reading and writing, Mitchell Mustangs.